I'm someone who's never been shy about speaking my mind. I'm not shy in front of a group of people. So the idea of people becoming so distraught at the idea of speaking in front of a crowd often perplexed me, and I found it to be very interesting. What I also find to be interesting is that nowadays people are far more comfortable making their statements via computers and social media. They're more willing to make these statements from the hidden protection of computer screens and alias names. How many of you Facebook, tweet, have a blog, Instagram? There we go. I appreciate that honesty. People are far more willing to tell a virtual community all about their day. Oh, I'm ice skating. Oh, I'm in Paris. Oh, I just got engaged. However, when it comes to publicly addressing an audience, they tense up. They become so frightened. Are you all familiar with the comedian Jerry Seinfeld? He makes this joke about public speaking, where he says, based on both past and current studies, the average person's #1 fear is public speaking. The second is death. And so Jerry made this joke where he says, this means that if at a funeral, the average person would rather be the one in the coffin than the one giving the eulogy. The average person would rather be the one dead in the coffin than standing in front of an audience talking about their loved one. And this joke, it's very popular. People find it to be very funny because the thought is absurd. Why would you rather be the one dead than the one alive? However, even though it's absurd, there's some truth to it, right? What is this fear? Where does this fear stem from? What do you guys think? Why are people afraid of public speaking? Yes?
They're afraid of what people are going to think of them.
Yes. Any other reasons? Any other thoughts? Well, you hit the head right on the head. The nail right on the head, excuse me. People don't want to be judged. There's this fear of being judged. We place so much time worrying about what we think other people think about us. We don't want people thinking that we're crazy or that we're stupid or that we don't know what we're talking about. We don't want people to tear us down or chew us out with their criticism. So we hold back, right? We create this shell for ourselves and we never fully break out of it. I know this happens especially in the high school setting. However, when you're up here speaking, the fear of being judged, this fear of being torn down by people's criticism, it's all based off of assumption. Because you don't know what people are thinking when you're up here speaking. I don't know what any of you guys are thinking. You could be thinking about how much you want to go home, how much homework you have, the fact that you're hungry, whatever. I don't know what you're thinking. The majority of the people in the audience don't want you to fail. They don't want you to flop. They're ready for you to be engaging. They're open and receptive to hearing what you have to say. They don't want you to flop. So all these stories of, oh, they're going to hate me, they're going to boo me off the stage, they're just stories that you're telling yourself. They're not based on any real facts, right? So these stories that we tell ourselves, it only helps to fuel our own insecurity. And what do I mean by insecurity? I'm sure you already know. The idea as though you're not enough. The feeling as though in some aspect you lack. But in reality, there's nothing that you lack. And those who are insecure often don't place a lot of value on their thoughts or opinions. And the last thing they would ever want to do is share those opinions publicly. That is the last thing that they would ever want to do. However, like I mentioned before, your thoughts, your opinions are very important, which is one reason why public speaking is so important. However, we should define the term. So what is public speaking? Public speaking is the art or the skill of addressing an audience effectively. It is the art or the skill of addressing an audience effectively. So what do I mean by an audience? Usually when people think of public speaking or speaking publicly, they imagine this huge arena with 1,000 people. You have one person on stage and their face is on these mega screens and all of these eyes are on them. And when you have that image, it can be very intimidating. However, when it comes to public speaking or speaking publicly, you can have an audience of 1,000, an audience of 500, an audience of 50, an audience of 15, or an audience of 1. The size of the audience never really mattered. What matters is how you convey your thoughts and how you do that effectively. Effectively means that when you speak, you are organized, you are clear, and you are confident. Organization, clarity, confidence. Organization, what does that mean? It means that what you say, it has to be structured, right? There has to be a beginning and an end. There has to be an A, B, C, and a D. There has to be some point that you're trying to make, that you're trying to carry the audience to. There has to be some focus that you're trying to get. Number 2, clarity. And one way to be clear is through your vocabulary. You will speak differently amongst your peers than you would in a professional setting, right? So for example, if I were to stand in front of you all today and I use the words like 401ks and mortgages, you guys would look at me like I'm crazy because those are words that you don't have to encounter just yet. You wouldn't be able to grasp what I'm saying to you. Just like if you were to speak in front of a much older audience and say, oh, my friend tagged me in her picture, she wrote on my wall, she tagged me on Instagram, or whatever the terminology is, those within that audience wouldn't be able to grasp what you're saying either. So you have to be aware of who is in your audience and the most effective vocabulary to use. Another way of being clear is consistency. When you speak, there has to be a theme. When you speak, your words can't contradict. Your statements can't contradict. It has to make sense. So for example, if I were to say, I love McDonald's, I think McDonald's is the best fast food restaurant in the entire nation, and I think McDonald's should be served at every high school in America because that's what kids love and that's what they deserve. By the way, I'm a vegetarian. That statement makes no sense. It contradicts. Make sure that what you say has a similar theme and that you're not going back and forth with your statements. The last thing, confidence. When you speak, you need to be sure of what you're saying. You have to be able to stand by your claims. The whole art of public speaking is to get the audience to see things from your perspective. It's to get the audience to see things through your unique lens. And if you're not confident about what you see, the audience will be unsure as well. So you have to make your statements with an air of conviction. Now, why is public speaking important? Public speaking is important because the ability to articulate your thoughts is vital. It is vital. It's vital because, number one, at some point you will have to do it. There's no way of escaping it. At some point you will have to do some public speaking or speaking publicly. You may not ever address an arena of 1,000 people, but in some way in your life it will come up. You all are in high school. I'm sure you guys have to give presentations where you're standing in front of the class and you have to explain your project to your peers. If you decide to run for an office at your school campus, you have to stand in front of your school body and express to them why you are the best for that position. Or even on a small scale, if you feel like you need to talk to a teacher about a grade you feel you didn't deserve, you have to have the maturity and the vocabulary to approach him or her and state your claim and defend yourself. When you go on for your job interviews, you will have to be able to sit in front of that employer and explain to him or her why you are the best for that position. I remember when I was on a job interview, the lady asked me, "So, what type of leader are you? Are you a dictator? Are you an Indian chief?" Or the last one I don't quite remember. However, it was a question that I wasn't expecting, right? But it was a question that I was presented with. And I had to come up with reasons why my leadership style was the best. So it's going to come up, even in your professions. I'm a teacher. I'm constantly speaking. I'm speaking to my students, I'm speaking to my team, I'm speaking to the parents that come up to me for information, for advice. Sometimes they just want a shoulder to cry on, someone to vent to. I have to have the communication skills to do that. If one of you wants to be a doctor, you have to be able to communicate with your patients. You have to be able to communicate with a level of compassion and intellect, and explain to him or her why their body is working or not working as it should. So it will come up. And it's best that you guys get comfortable with this idea right now, because as humans, that's how we interact. We interact with our body language, but we also communicate with words. It's how we initiate, develop, and maintain our relationships. And I think the worst thing is to be misunderstood. Have you guys ever been or had this happen to you where you're texting a friend and you're texting him or her like a joke or something, but the friend doesn't understand that it's a joke and they get offended that you sent them this text and you have to go about explaining what you really meant to them? One of the worst things is to be misunderstood. And public speaking, or speaking publicly, is a go-to medium. So it's a medium that you go to when all other mediums don't work. Because you won't always be tweeting, you won't always be emailing or Facebooking. There will come many points in your life where you will have to interact with people face to face. And it's best to get comfortable with that right now. Another reason why public speaking is important is because as young ladies living in a patriarchal society, it's important that you continue to activate your voice. And what is a patriarchal society? Yes.
I guess you could say it's male-dominated.
That's right, male-dominated, where men are in control, they're in power. They have power politically, and they have power economically. Technically, women, we didn't have any political power until 1920. And if it wasn't for the women's suffrage movement and for those women speaking out about inequalities and the injustice, we wouldn't have progressed as far as we have today. Therefore, I encourage you to continue to voice your thoughts, voice your opinions, and not feel overshadowed or intimidated by male counterparts. I feel like this goes on a lot in high school, well, even in the professional world as well, but I know that my days at Chadwick and LMU, I saw the boys were very aggressive when it came to speaking. They weren't afraid to interject, they weren't afraid to say what's on their mind, they aren't afraid to say what's happening, or it doesn't matter who agrees with them or who likes them, they're very aggressive. The girls, on the other hand, tend to be more laid back. They tend to let the boys do their thing, and they don't say anything. They think, oh, it's not that important. It's just a classroom discussion, one of many. It doesn't matter. I don't need to compete to speak. And which is true, you don't need to compete to speak. However, I do encourage you all to speak during those classroom discussions. You guys, well, as young women, you experience the world much differently than a man does. And during those classroom discussions, you're able to provide a perspective that may not even have been thought of before. Yes.
If you're beaten down by the same boy every class period, how, I don't know, that just like, it makes me not want to speak anymore.
If you're beaten down,
If he contradicts you every other sentence, there's not really a point in me speaking.
you mean like if you make a statement and the boy just...
It doesn't matter what it is, even if
Yeah.
he agrees with me, he'll make it better, and then like go with it, because he'll say that was good, but mine's better, or he'll contradict it. But like, I don't understand why would I keep speaking if that happens all the time.
Well, no, I don't encourage you to compete or to argue. What I do encourage you to do is to say what's on your mind and to make it clear. I'm not one for competitive speaking either. Once you say what you're thinking and you make your claim, that should be it. Because going back and forth like that, it becomes very trivial, very childish, and you don't need to invest in that. You raise your hand, you say, well, I think this, that, and the third, and then you should feel content with that. But what I don't want to happen is for you all to create a pattern for yourselves. This pattern of silence that carries over into your college career and into your professional career. Because by not saying anything, you are training yourself not to say anything. And when the time comes for you to speak and to have an opinion, you're so frightened at the idea of actually saying it. You're teaching yourself what to do and what not to do. And I want all of you to just shed this weight of insecurity, because all of you are creative and talented and smart in your own right. And there should be no fear attached to saying what's on your mind and expressing yourself, as long as you're doing it in a way that's not going to tear someone else down. I encourage you to do so.